I'm David Boehm, and you're watching Anything is Possible.
I'm Patrick Tsang, global citizen, investor. Join me as I talk with global influencers for their insight, wisdom, and how they overcame their own personal challenges. Sharing positivity, overcoming challenges, creating one world together. I'm Patrick Tsang. Anything is possible. Welcome everyone to Anything is Possible. Once again, I have a special guest. He's a good friend of mine. We're in Hong Kong now. We're in a special place called The Hub, which we'll talk about. It's my good friend David Boehm. David is a serial entrepreneur. He started off as a boring accountant. He managed to get away from that. Then he did a big stint in mining, working with the likes of Robert Freeland. And now he's trying to help change the world with his new health company, Miskawaan Group, if I pronounce that correctly. He's also a big horse owner in Hong Kong. And one thing that I respect David greatly is his philanthropic works in The Hub, which we'll talk about. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Patrick. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. So, David, as you know, Anything is Possible, our show, we try to share positivity, especially for the young people. Obviously, this is the perfect place to talk about it. How has been your COVID-19 experience so far?
Well, Patrick, I can only use one word to explain about this year. It's extraordinary. And one good thing is that whatever happens that isn't quite right or is not working so well, you just blame it on the coronavirus, right? So the biggest impact for me personally is that I can't see my family. I'm with my wife here in Hong Kong, but I can't see my mother, who's 93. I can't see my children. They're literally in 3 countries around the world. And then I think about, okay, well, at least from my perspective, next year I'll get to see my family. But then I read that Save the Children estimated that 99% of the kids in the world have been negatively impacted by COVID. Either they're not getting enough nutrition, or they're not getting enough schooling, enough education. One of my friends here who has a 12-year-old in Hong Kong at the ESF school, she said the last full day of school she had this year was on January 23. So it's an extraordinary year, and I'm really worried about our children in particular. What's the impact on their mental health, their education from the year of 2020, which has been, I guess, the year of the shutdown. Yeah. So but then again, there's always opportunity, so let's look at it as a year of opportunity for the future as well.
Understand. And then what about advice for some of our younger audience? What should they be doing? Should they be equipping themselves? Should they go and learn more, study, or exercise more? Or, what should they do?
Yeah, I think a big issue, as I mentioned, is mental health. And one of our charities runs the Child Helpline in Thailand. And during the lockdown in Bangkok and the rest of Thailand, we had an exponential increase in kids contacting us about their situation, their concerns. So I would tell the kids, look, be really open about the things you're worried about. Talk to your parents, or talk to your friends, or talk to someone who you trust. Call a helpline. Every country has a helpline if you need someone independent to talk to. But the most important thing is talk. And one thing I've always tried to do in my personal life is to remain positive, even in a very difficult situation. So there'll always be better times. There'll always be a better day. So no matter how bad it looks right now, even for the street kids we look after in Bangkok, better days are ahead. So be positive is my big message to the kids of today.
Absolutely, which is the whole essence of Anything is Possible.
There you go.
So David, you're obviously Australian. Tell us about your experience growing up in Australia, and why did you leave Australia?
Yeah, I had a very average childhood. My father was an immigrant from Germany. He came to Australia literally with nothing. He built up his own business. I wouldn't say we were wealthy, but we were solid middle class. And the one thing my father emphasized, because he didn't have a chance to get an education because he was suffering from the World War II situation, he wanted to make sure my sister and I got a good education. So he saved and he saved and he saved to put us through private schools. And the greatest gift that I got from my father was an education, the best education that he could provide. And Australia's a long way from everywhere, and I guess I always had...
Not New Zealand.
New Zealand. But I always had a wanderlust, and I always wanted to travel. So my father basically bribed me, and he said, well, son, if you get through high school, I'll take you on a trip. And he was always traveling because he was an importer. So at the ripe old age of 17, I took my first trip overseas to the Philippines. I came to Hong Kong, to Taiwan, and we went to California and New Zealand, and came back to Sydney, all within about a week.
Okay.
And that was it. I was hooked. I was hooked on travel, and I knew that as soon as I finished my education, I was going to be leaving and going overseas.
Understand. And then just talk a little bit about the traveling part. What's the part about traveling that was so, was it the travel, or was it because you're following your dad during work and you got the buzz of the entrepreneurship, or was it the travel specifically, or a combination of both?
A bit of both, but what I really like about travel, Patrick, is that I love to meet people. I try and put myself out of my comfort zone every day. So if you just stay at home and meet the same people and talk to the same family groupings, that's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
You're going to be comfortable. So I love to go to places. I love to go to places that I don't know anybody, and I wouldn't say I'm shy, but I'm not a naturally outgoing person. So I've got to go and force myself to talk to people. And what fascinates me is learning about different cultures. And no matter where I've been in the world, you know, I love Asia. Asia's my home. But European countries, African countries, in the Americas, it's all so different. And I just think, well, the world is out there, and we've got to go and explore it, right?
Absolutely.
And it's just like I feel it's like an obligation. How can I sit at home when the world is out there to view? And I guess my biggest fear is being normal, right? I don't regard myself as a normal person, and I guess any one of us, like you and like myself, who feel a little bit driven, we can't be classified as normal. So it was a bit of both, but really it's the excitement of meeting new people and visiting new places that I really, even to this day, I can't stop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So David, just want to share with you to relate to your experience. I think myself, the greatest gift my parents gave me, and also the way that the family has passed down generations, is actually education, right. which is why it's very dear to my heart, because I think education is the only thing that changes the world. Because if we don't educate our next generation, then the world has no hope, right? That's the first thing. I think I agree with you on the travel part. I think we were talking offline earlier that, like pre-COVID, I was doing 3 days Bangkok, 5 days Zurich, and different places, and
basically insane, right?
Insane. But I mean, it's just crazy. Like I made a trip to London recently, and I actually got jet lag for the first time for a long time, because I just haven't been
not used to it.
Not used to it at all, because I was not on the plane for more than 6 months, right? But moving on, so we're in Hong Kong now. Hong Kong's your home. You've been in Hong Kong for 40 years. Not trying to embarrass you about your age, but tell us about, why did you come to Hong Kong in the first place, and then why did you end up staying?
Well, my father's business was taken over by an English firm, and the original intention was that they would like me to be trained in their offices in London, New York, and Hong Kong before going back to Australia and basically building up my father's business into more along the lines of their international activities, which was commodity trading. So I went to London. I worked there. I went to New York, and I went to spend some time in the New York office. And of course, it was great for me because I was traveling and I was getting paid. And then I came to Hong Kong. It was the last stop. And when I was here, unfortunately, the firm discovered a major undisclosed trading position, which cost them around £10 million. In 1981, that was a lot of money.
Sure.
It halved their profits. So basically, the people that took over from the management that all had to leave decided to shut down the Asian operations. So by that time, it was 1982, and I'd become very fond of Hong Kong. I found a lot of friends here. I loved the energy of Hong Kong. I loved the attitude of people that anything is possible. People would just naturally be working it hard. In Australia, where I come from, it's very rare for people to work past 5 or 5:30. Well, when I was there anyway, maybe it's changed now.
Yes.
But in Hong Kong, people routinely happily work late. They'll happily get the job done, what their bosses ask them to do.
Absolutely.
And willingly. So I really liked it here, and so I thought, well, what can I do to stay in Hong Kong? And my father, fortunately, had pushed me to get a profession, which was accounting. He said the best business education is accounting, and I think he's right about that. And so because I had that qualification, I could revert back to my profession, and I joined an accounting firm in 1983, and never left.
Understand. And then obviously I understand you've done multiple businesses across different sectors, and obviously mining's been a big thing. How did you get into mining?
Well, I strove to become a partner in the accounting firm I was with, Grant Thornton. And to be honest, Patrick, the day I became a partner, it was like the biggest anticlimax of my life, right? I thought I'd been working, for 3 years non-stop, working like a dog to make partnership, and I thought, well, okay, what do I do now? So basically, the day I became a partner was the day I started to think about leaving, and I was always just looking at the right opportunity that I could find that would suit me, would suit my skill set, and I could enjoy and would involve travel. That in the various people I came across, one of my clients over the years was a guy called Robert Friedland. He was setting up in Asia in the mid-90s. I talked to Robert. I said, Robert, I'm not really excited about working in the accounting firm anymore. How about I come and join you? And he said, that's a great idea. So in '96, I retired from the accounting firm at the ripe old age of 39 and joined Robert Friedland and started to learn a whole new profession, a whole new way of doing business. And what was really great about that was that my learning curve suddenly shot up again, right? And when you're a partner in an accounting business, you're learning about what your clients are doing, but you're not learning a lot for your own self-education. But changing my career, my learning curve just shot up, and that was really enjoyable for me.
Absolutely. I think from my own experience is there's a lot of sectors or new technology that we get involved that we had no idea prior to the investment, but it's about the self-education process. I think people like us, because we're so curious, that's what drives you to do more, because you want to learn every day. So I always keep preaching about being students of life, where you have to keep learning every day. Otherwise, it's just going to get boring, right?
Right.
So I think on LinkedIn, you also wrote an article on your experience of catching dengue fever. Tell us about that experience. How did you, recover?
Well, it's interesting because I like to say now that my medical business saved my own life, and it's true. So we set up this medical business in Asia a few years ago, together with Dr. Johannes Wesley, who's an amazing doctor. He treats people in a way what we call functional medicine, which is using the inherent ability of your own body to recover and to stay healthy. And it's quite similar to traditional Chinese medicine in that you're looking at the body as a whole. You're not just treating one symptom, you're treating the whole body, because whenever something's wrong with us, there's always more than one thing. So he and I got together, we set up this medical business to expand all the German technology to Asia. We've been very happy with the way it's going. We're getting bigger and bigger. And in December of last year, my wife always likes, because I work so hard, I always promise my wife a couple of trips a year. She always chooses Paris, right? So we went to France, we went to Paris, and then when I was there, I got really sick. And luckily it was December before COVID, because a really bad fever. I mean, had COVID been around at that time, for sure everyone would have thought I had COVID, because I had all the classic symptoms. And then the doctor came. My wife obviously looks Asian. I obviously was staying at a hotel. I wasn't from there, but he didn't ask me any questions about where I'd been. He just gave me the typical aspirin, paracetamol, and antibiotics. And even though 90% of fevers are caused by viruses, not bacteria, as we now know with COVID. So that was on a Friday. Saturday, I wasn't feeling any better. Another doctor came, same drugs. On the Sunday, I was really, I know my body very well, I was really getting really sick. So I called Dr. Wesley, who happened to be in Bangkok. I explained to him what it was. He said, I don't know what you've got, but you better come back right away. So we hopped on the plane the next day. We flew back to Bangkok. I didn't tell my wife, but one stage on the flight, I woke up, I was on the floor of the restroom in the plane. I just passed out. And when we got to Bangkok airport, she said, you better get a wheelchair. And I said, I can't get a wheelchair through the airport in Bangkok, but I had to, and I literally couldn't walk. Like, it's quite a big airport. So we got to the clinic, and
because you didn't want to show weakness, or what? Yeah?
I just thought I'd never see the day when I'll be in a wheelchair going through one of the airports I use every month, right?
Sure.
I think it's partial stupidity, right? Because obviously, I mean, I don't think I literally could have walked that kilometre, but you just don't want to show weakness.
Sure.
It's true.
Yeah.
And what does it matter, right? Because who's going to see me?
Absolutely.
It's just some other passengers who I don't know. But that's sometimes the human failing of stupidity and ego, which is nonsense, right? I mean, none of us really deserve to have an ego, in my view.
Absolutely.
We just be as good as we can be and do the best that we can. So anyway, we got to the clinic, went straight to the clinic. Most of our treatments are through infusion, IV drips. And so Dr. Wesley and my Thai doctors immediately started treating me with those IV drips. They didn't know then it was dengue fever, but they did my platelet count. It was 20,000 when it should have been 200,000 plus. And it was only on the Thursday that they found it was dengue fever once the blood test results came back. But Dr. Wesley said that had I stayed in France, they would have kept treating me the same way. With a platelet count that low, you start bleeding internally, and then you're done for, right? So if I hadn't have set up this operation, if I didn't know Dr. Wesley, if I hadn't have gone to Bangkok and got some serious treatment for the problems that I had, it was highly likely I would have died. The other important thing to bear in mind is that our signature strength is to keep people's immune system calm and balanced and strong. And because my immune system was very strong, I managed to survive the dengue fever, survive all the wrong drugs, survive all the flight back to Thailand, and get through it. So it was the benefit of being. I practice what I preach. I do my own therapies, and also being in the right clinic for that type of thing that helps. So I mean, if for no other reason, I set this business up to save my own life. So I can only be thankful to the medical team there that helped me to such an extent.
I mean, that's very inspiring and also very good for society as well. It's just, as a profit center for money making. But we're sitting now in the hub in Hong Kong in an area called Sham Shui Po, which is, for some of the audience that they don't know, is one of the poorer areas in Hong Kong.
Right.
And I think we've been discussing also at length, which is what people don't understand in overseas is that Hong Kong, like London and New York, there are poor areas and there's a lot of people crying for help and they don't get it. So tell us what the hub is and what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so when I sort of was fortunate to make enough money to feel I could donate, I would donate to very large charities like the Salvation Army. And during the global financial crisis, I read that the Salvation Army lost over $3 million in these complicated financial products that even I didn't really understand. And I thought, well, I'm donating money to this charity, which is a good charity, but why are they investing money in this kind of product and then losing it? This is all donated money. So I thought, I'd rather do something that I know the money's going to go to the people who really need it. So what can I do? So I thought, okay, firstly, I'm in Asia, I want to do something in Asia. Secondly, the people who are in a tough situation, who are there not because of their own decisions, are children, right? Adults make the decisions and the children suffer the consequences.
Sure.
So I thought, okay, Asia, children, what can I do? I met a guy in Australia, Reverend Bill Cruz, who was doing a lot of work in Thailand, and he and I got together with a charity in Thailand called Childline Thailand Foundation. As I mentioned, they run the helpline there, and they had this was in 2011, they had a situation where sometimes they needed a safe house for the children who were calling in a really bad situation. So we decided to get together, Childline Thailand Foundation, myself and Reverend Bill Cruz, and set up the hub in Bangkok, which basically was a safe haven. And then we realised, well, there wasn't that many of these kids that need a safe haven on a regular basis. What would we do with the premises on the other time? So we thought, what is the need? We talked with the charities there, and we decided to make it a centre for homeless children, and so and street kids. So since 2011, we've been looking after the street kids in the area of Chulalongpong, which is where the railway station is in Bangkok, and where the street kids, the homeless kids, were congregating. So I'm pretty proud of what we've done. There's no problem as such of street kids anymore there because they've either come through our system, we've got them back to their families or got them a job, or they're still with us, the really tough cases, but at least they're being looked after.
Sure.
So I got back to Hong Kong in early 2012 and I was telling my friend Bruce Stinson as to what I was doing in Bangkok, and he said, you know, both of us have had a lot of time in Hong Kong, we've made our money here, we should do something for the kids of Hong Kong.
Sure.
And I said, what a great idea. So we looked around, we joined up with a charity called Against Child Abuse, which runs the helpline here. And whilst we found there was no problem as such of street kids, we were shocked to find that over 200,000 children in Hong Kong, according to the government's own statistics, live in poverty. And people who know Hong Kong Island is a beautiful, prosperous place. We all live in high rises. We go to a nice fancy office. We eat in fancy restaurants. And Against Child Abuse, took us around Sham Shui Po and some other poor districts in Hong Kong. And Patrick, I was shocked. I was ashamed of myself to live in this city for so many years and not realise this poverty was here. I mean, we're talking about families of 4 living in an apartment the size of our bathroom. And there was always a reason for that. Perhaps the father had an accident, couldn't work. Perhaps it was a single parent family. The mother couldn't work because she needed to take care of the kid, whatever. But just abject poverty. So we just thought, well, okay, we realised these are the kids that we have to look after. So what we wanted to do, Bruce and I, was to set up a place where the kids could come, firstly, and be safe, but secondly, to have all the experiences that I enjoyed in my relatively normal, boring life growing up in Australia. So just simple things like sport, art, exercise, access to things like computers. Most of these poor families don't have computers. Excursions, music. So the Hong Kong government gives you an education, but if you don't have money, all these extracurricular activities don't exist.
Absolutely.
So that's what we set up the hub to be. We set it up in Sham Shui Po, which is one of the poorest districts of Hong Kong, and we call it a happy place for the kids to come. We help them with their homework. We do educational support. Obviously, that's a big thing. We teach them English. We teach them computer studies and all those extracurricular activities which perhaps you and I took for granted growing up, and these kids never had exposure to. And is one extra benefit that happened here is that it became a support centre for the families as well, often single parents, some of them from the mainland, lonely in Hong Kong, and they got to meet friends here, and they started to, we realised there was a big need to try and teach the parents about things like nutrition and hygiene and just basic things that we take for granted that when you're poor, maybe it's not the most important thing on your mind. So we've used the hub as a place not just for children, but also for the families and the parents as well, which we're very proud of. We've got a great team here. This year, as you can imagine, the year has meant that the need for support services has gone up significantly. We've had to meet that need. It's a tough year because, as all the charities know globally, donations are going down, but we're getting some really great support from organisations domestically that understand the good things we're doing, and so I'm really heartened by the generosity of people still in these really tough times to help a cause like the hub. And even Patrick, you know, to have this opportunity on Anything Is Possible to talk about it, it really helps awareness, and every little bit helps. You know?
Absolutely. I think it's a very humbling and touching experience for myself to join you, and I think we can try to explore more, as we spoke about, to try to do more, not just in Hong Kong, but elsewhere, including China and other places. I think we can join forces to do even more.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
David, I know that you're a big horse racing fan. I'm more passionate about, you know, football, soccer, but you've been in Hong Kong for a long time. I understand you also knew nothing about horses at the beginning. Tell us about the journey of the horse racing in Hong Kong.
Yeah, horse racing has always been a sport that fascinated me. My parents had, I think, one racehorse in their lifetimes, and I just always wanted to get more exposure to horse racing. And of course, horse racing in Hong Kong is almost a religion.
Yes.
And especially in the early 80s when I arrived, every Wednesday night they put up the house full sign at Happy Valley, because the only place you could really bet was at the racetrack. And so they'd sell out every Wednesday night. And I had the opportunity to go, and I remember seeing the people who won the race got to take a photo with their horse, and they looked so proud, and I thought, wow, I'd love to be that person, right? Okay. It suddenly became an ambition for me. And it's really hard to be a horse owner in Hong Kong, because firstly you have to join the Hong Kong Jockey Club, and then secondly you have to qualify to be an owner, and then thirdly you have to go on a ballot to get the right to buy a horse. So it's incredibly difficult. So I thought, well, it's an ambition, but can I do it? Anything is possible, right? That's the theme of today. So you know, I always like to say that we can do the impossible, it just takes a little bit longer.
Sure.
So it seemed like the impossible dream. Anyway, we managed to join the Jockey Club through some friends in Australia, and eventually we got to a stage where we could actually afford to buy an inexpensive horse. And a friend of mine and I made the application, and everyone said, oh, you won't get in to get a horse, at least on your third or fourth application, because it just takes that long. You know, no one gets it first time. So we put the application in and forgot about it. And then in those days, the Jockey Club clubhouse was actually at Happy Valley Racetrack. Yeah. And I used to go quite often to the Derby Room restaurant there. And one day I went to take some clients for lunch, and there was a crowd around the notice board. And this was in 1988, before internet. And I thought, oh, what are they looking at? Like, you know, curious as we are. And it was the list of successful permit holders for that year, and in alphabetical order. And being Boehm, B, my name was first on the list. And I thought, oh, what do I do now, right? I had no idea about, you know, how to get a horse. I knew nothing about it whatsoever. So it was a challenge, but we educated ourselves really quickly. And we met a horse trainer called John Moore, who just retired this year. And we found a horse. And before the horse raced, one of my clients, who was a racehorse owner in Australia, he said to me, David, I hope your horse never wins. And I said, John, why would you say that to me? You know, of course I want the horse to win. He said, take it from me. He said, if you own a racehorse and your horse wins, it's like the worst drug in the world. It's the biggest high you could possibly imagine. And you'll be on a euphoria for a few days. And then it gradually wears off. And then you think, wow, that was so good. I'd do anything to get that feeling back again, right? And then you spend the rest of your life trying to find good horses. And it's like the worst kind of drug. And actually that friend of mine, that client, he's right. But it's, what I love about the sport in Hong Kong is that it's all controlled by the Hong Kong Jockey Club, as we know. And Hong Kong Jockey Club is the biggest taxpayer. Last financial year, they paid 24 billion Hong Kong dollars, $3 billion US dollars in taxes. And also they donated another 8 billion Hong Kong dollars, $1 billion US dollars in charitable donations. And it's almost like, it's like a voluntary tax on people who bet towards the good of the community. So it's a great system in Hong Kong of supporting not just the sport itself, but also the community. And the Hong Kong Jockey Club donates a lot of money every year to causes like the Hub, to the poorest members of society, and they donate to culture and to art, and not just philanthropy to the poorest people in society. So it's nice every time you have a bet and you don't win, you say, well, I made a donation to charity today. And that's my Hong Kong racing story, and I still love it. I'm fortunate to be a voting member of the Jockey Club, and I'm always active in the horse racing because it's a passion of mine.
Understand. So, hopefully I can learn from you and do something.
I'd love to teach you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've seen that you've jumped from a little kid to traveling, got the drug there, and then you went to do accounting, got bored, then did mining, and then you went into health. I guess a bit of luck as well, not just because of you wanted to get into that business, and then obviously horse racing is another thing, the philanthropic side as well. But these kind of traits, mentality. I'm not even just talking about the entrepreneur, but as a person, what do you think are the traits needed to become, successful, in your opinion?
I think you mentioned one word earlier, Patrick, which was very relevant, and it's being curious. Firstly, you need to be curious, right? What else can be done? What else is possible? And look, to be honest, I'm nearly 64. I started this health business 3 years ago. I didn't need to do it, but what else am I going to do, right? I mean, my kids are growing up substantially. I've got a grandchild now. Obviously, I'll spend plenty of time with my family, but you've got to keep your mind active. I'm a big believer in that. So curiosity is a big part of entrepreneurship. I think trying to always do better for yourself and for the community is a good incentive. And I think the most important thing, because my dad worked until he was 87, and he always regretted retiring. He lived another 5 years, and he'd always say to me, son, I've got nothing to do, no one's calling me. What a bad mistake I made to retire, right? At 87. So I'm a little bit scared of that. So I think it's good to keep incentivizing yourself to avoid something that would be. I guess what I'm saying is that I'm scared of being bored, right? And I'm someone who I can enjoy being on my own for about a day, and then I get bored with my own company. I've got to go and talk to people and meet people. But I'm trying to answer your question in a long-winded way. But I think that to be a successful entrepreneur, you've got to keep asking questions and keep striving to find those answers. And most of the time you won't, or you'll find yourself going down another pathway. And I learned a good lesson from Robert Friedland. He always said, you never know what leads to what. So there's almost never a phone call that I won't return. There's almost never an email I won't reply to. There's almost never a meeting I won't take, because you never know what leads to what. So I think it's really important to engage with everybody in society. I think it's when I go to the bathroom and there's a guy in the bathroom, sometimes you get that in Asia, who's handing you a paper towel or who's cleaning the toilet. I always take the time to say hi,
Yeah.
and usually give him a tip, $10 Hong Kong or something like that, because he's working hard, right?
Sure.
And to me, it's like he's the same kind of human being as the chairman of the Hong Kong Jockey Club, or friends like yourself in my social circle. You could say, I really like the part about being an entrepreneur is to the ability to work together with all parts of society, and to engage with all parts of society. And I always like to, someone sort of talked about management by walking around. And I really love that philosophy, that if you have a business and you want to see what's going on, you go out there in your clinic or in your factory or to your football stadium, in your case, and you see what's going on, right? But I think it all gets back to that one word you use very, very importantly, Patrick, and that's curiosity. We're curious about what can the world do next. We're curious about the things we don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know until we know. I know it sounds silly, but we really,
Absolutely.
we don't. And so I think that if you have a fear of being bored and you have a fear of being normal, then you can be an entrepreneur.
It's very true. David, I mean, I want to share with you one of the things I always live by is, you know, learn as if it is your first day and live as if it is your last day.
Right.
So I think it's that curiosity to keep going and not just sit in one place, and you need to keep evolving and changing for the better.
Right.
But as you know, anything is possible. We're trying to share positivity. One of my good friends that we've also interviewed before, Caroline Rush, who's the chief executive of the British Fashion Council, she says something like, no one has a perfect life. We all go up, down, right? So in terms of the younger audience, what would you share with them? Like, what's been your biggest, you know, setback?
Well, Patrick, in my personal life, my biggest regret was getting divorced for the first time, mainly because of the negative impact it had on my children, especially my elder daughter at the time. And that really, you know, it broke me up on a number of occasions. My ex-wife and the girls moved back to Australia, and particularly in the early part of the divorce, it was really, really difficult. I couldn't see my children. I could only speak to them once a week, and it was very hostile. But anyway, we got over that, and we ended up become a friendly family again, to the extent that we even all went on holidays together. So we got over that, but I regret having to put my kids through that. And so I guess the lesson from there is, you know, choose your partner carefully. But I never regret anything, actually, on a long-term basis, because I don't really think there's anything in my life I'd change, right? Because from that marriage, even though I didn't marry the right person for me, I got two beautiful daughters. So how can I be regretful? On a business level, my biggest regret was in the Asian financial crisis. I was way over leveraged, and I didn't officially go bankrupt, but I technically went bankrupt. I had way more liabilities than assets, and it taught me a really good lesson. Luckily, it was at a time in my career where I could recover. I could make the money back and pay off my debts and rebuild again. But it wouldn't be a lesson I want to learn later in life when it's almost too late. So I really think that leverage is an important part of business, but you've got to be really careful as an individual about leverage. So they're my two regrets.
So I understand. So, you know, I want to share with the audience, you know, sometimes we give advice to the younger guys, go for it, do what it takes, leverage or whatever it may be, right? And then on the other front is you have to make the mistakes in order to learn. But, you know, somebody might be 40, 45, 50, 60, 65, and you're in a different stage of your life. Do you still go all out and try and do something because of the curiosity? I mean, where's the balance in your opinion?
It's a good question, and to answer honestly, I don't know. So in this medical business, I wouldn't say I'm over leveraged, because we're not. It's not a business we're using borrowed money for the most part. It's mostly equity, but we're expanding really quickly. Probably more than what we need to, but it's such a good product, I want to give it to more people. I think that you're right, you have to learn from your own mistakes. And I think, you know, all of us, once we get familiar with money, we make mistakes, right? And that's how we start to learn. But I think I would always caution younger people, and I talk with my kids about it, just be careful about borrowing money, right? And it's so easy to borrow money these days. You get a credit card almost when you start the day you start work, and these credit card companies will let you spend pretty much your whole annual salary on the credit card debt because it's earning so much interest for the company. And I think that it's just really dangerous. And I would like to think that the kids are smarter than I was, and take their time before they, you know, leverage debt is not a bad thing, but it's got to be carefully thought through, and it needs to be carefully applied. So I think kids should be cautious about that. But I'm actually heartened by the younger generation. You know, kids especially who are, I can't remember whether it is X or Y or Z, but the kids who are in their 20s these days, they're so much more aware of their social responsibilities than I was. When I was in my 20s, I just wanted to make money, have a career and have a good time. But kids these days, they're really aware of the consequences of the planet and the environmental issues we've got, of poverty, of unfairness, and that gives me a lot of hope for the future, because I think these kids are really already thinking about the positive things that they can do in the world, and I'm heartened by the fact that this generation is coming along with that in mind. And you know, we're talking a lot these days about sustainability, sustainable investments, and I think it's something that you're very much engaged on as well. And I think the force for the change is not coming from the old guys like me, it's coming from the young kids who are saying, well, you know, as we're making money, we're not going to invest in your company, Mr. ABC, because you're not sustainable. If you switch your business to become sustainable, okay, we'll invest with you. So I'm actually learning a lot from the young generation, and maybe they can teach me more than what I can teach them. You know?
It's very true, David, because I think that the younger generation nowadays, when they're actually applying for a job, they're not necessarily looking for, I want to work in a big company or I'm making more money. Actually, a lot of it is actually now purpose driven. So they want to be attached to a greater purpose. For example, you know, plant-based foods or climate change or reduction in carbon emissions, and they'll be even more motivated, incentivized to work, you know, their asses off for that cause, rather than just, oh, I want to work for, you know, ABC Co. Right? So I think that that's a great observation. But related to this is principles and ethics. What principles and ethics do you live by, and how do you uphold them?
I think it's very important that we have an ethical approach to everything we do. I think in the context of other people, I think the old biblical saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Sure.
That's something that we should really apply. I think that ethics in business is unfortunately becoming less and less common. You know, when I first started my career, you could do a lot of things on a handshake. You really could, and people would honor that handshake. I think that's almost gone now. People just feel a little bit distrustful, which is a shame. I think I'm really disheartened by what you talked about earlier, the polarization of not just, you know, different societies, but within societies. If you look at the situation now in the West, say in the USA or in Australia, where I come from originally, it's quite disheartening. So I think we've got to try and overcome that. And those of us who have the opportunity to do it ourselves, we should do it. And I think that you've got to always approach a business and be ethical about it. And you need to also look at the consequences of your actions, right? So if the business you're going to go in is going to hurt a lot of people, you've got to really be careful about, in my view, going into that business. So, for example, you know, if I think I heard an ad this week from a tobacco company saying they're looking forward to the end of cigarettes by 2030 or 2035. So, okay, that's interesting. What are they going to do? But great, you know, I'm all for it, because tobacco doesn't do good things for people. Sure. It makes you unhealthy. What I love about the medical business is that, as well as being a successful business, we're actually helping thousands of people recover and sustain their health. And so, you know, and also because it's part of everything I do, we have a philanthropic part of the medical business, which is supporting our hubs here in Hong Kong and in Bangkok, and also in Myanmar. We have our third hub that my wife started. So I personally, you know, some people might think it's old-fashioned, but I personally think ethics are paramount in business. And I will still, if I shake your hand and I say, you know, that's the deal we're going to do, that's still, I still find myself bound by that handshake. And it's a little bit distressing to me when you have to spend so much negative energy on dealing with the consequences of people who maybe haven't done the right thing, and then you've got to get lawyers involved, and I'd much rather be doing new things and looking forward. So, you know, when I left my accounting firm, another one of the partners left about the same time, and we both felt hardly done by. We felt the managing partner at the time hadn't done the right thing, and she wanted to take legal action, and I thought, well, I'd rather just focus my energy on the positive future rather than the negative past. So that's what I did, and you know, maybe I could have got some more money, but it wasn't worth it to me to do that. So I think if you are ethical and you follow some basic principles, which we all know what they are, you're actually going to be far more successful, because you're not going to be wasting any time dealing with people who are calling you out for the things you've done that you shouldn't have done, right? So I hope I explained myself correctly, but I think that by doing the right thing and by being ethical, it's actually going to benefit you, not just as a human being, but it's going to benefit your business as well.
Yeah, I think in the wrong, I agree with that. I think you know, myself, what we've done now is we only work with people we like and like-minded people, and we just, you know, push away, you know, negativity and negative people, because it's just limited time on this planet that we have to, you know, make use of it. But does religion or spirituality help you in any way in your life or your business?
Yeah, I was born a Christian. My father was Jewish. He escaped the Nazis in Germany, and luckily he did. And then he came to Australia and met my mother, who was a Christian. Under the Jewish religion, you probably know, they always follow the mother's religion, so I was brought up a Christian. When I met my current wife, she's been a committed Buddhist since her early childhood, and she basically introduced me to Buddhism, which I think is not so much a religion, more a philosophy.
Sure.
And so I've become a Buddhist monk on several occasions. And so what I find that is really balancing about Buddhism is that it's really grounding, right? And you know, Buddha himself was a very rich man, a royal person, who left it all behind and became a homeless person, begging for food every day. So it's not a sacrifice that most people can make. I don't think it's some sacrifice that I could make, but it's a great way of grounding yourself. And if I'm feeling stressed out or tense, or something's not going right, I find that just remembering some of the Buddhist tenets, for example, mindfulness. Just remember, you know, what are you here for? Well, why are we doing this? You can really bring back to you the important things in life. And then, if you think about, if you dissect the things that you're worrying about, and then I think, well, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? So this thing I'm worried about, if it really happens, what's the worst thing that can happen? And it's probably not that bad, right? So actually, I've sort of taught myself through spirituality of Buddhism is not to worry about stuff, right? Because what's the point? And so if you don't worry, of course you have to think about the things you need to do, and you have to think about strategy and your business and looking after your family and helping the kids in the charity. But I don't worry about it. I just think about it and then I go and do it. So I think that's been a great help for me to calm your mind. You know, every morning I give blessing to Buddha, and every morning I do some meditation. And I think if we can all do something like that, it doesn't matter what religion you're part of, or even if you have no religion, you can still find something to give you a calming effect. Because after all, life is very busy, life is very challenging. And then the other thing I think of, Patrick, is that, okay, I've actually been very lucky in my life. And I think about some of the kids that are here in the hub, and these kids are luckier than the street kids we look after in Thailand, for example. And you know, some of these kids have been through unbelievable hell. And when you think about those kids, there's nothing that's going in your life that's anything remotely similar or comparable to what they're going through, what they've been through.
Sure.
So Buddhism for me has been a great grounder.
Super. And what about role models? Who's your role model?
My dad, my father. He's no longer with us, but he was a incredibly wise man. As I said, he never was educated because the war got in the way. He went from the Nazis to work in the Philippines, and then he was subject to the Japanese occupation. It wasn't much better, if at all. And then he moved to Australia to follow his parents and his brother after the war, and he really instilled in me the love for Asia. He was a trader, an importer. He started traveling to China in the early 60s and went to the Guangzhou Trade Fair in the 60s. And even then, he could see that, in his opinion, the future was going to be in Asia and China in particular. I mean, obviously it was well before Deng Xiaoping and everything that happened. And China went through some tough times in the 60s and 70s. But he always instilled for me a love of Asia and a huge amount of respect for the Chinese people. So I really think of myself, I'm completely colorblind. I think of myself as Asian. People always laugh about me being an egg, right? I'm white outside but yellow inside. But I really, the way I live my life, my philosophies, how I treat people, it's completely Asian. I go back to Australia, where I'm from, and I like the place. I was born there, but I don't feel home.
Sure.
I feel home in Asia.
Absolutely. Well, I get being called a banana, so right. The other way around.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something a bit more lighthearted. Is there any book or movie that you really like that you can share with the audience in terms of why you like the story?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. When I usually, until this year, I always watch movies on airplanes.
Sure.
Like you, I was always traveling somewhere. And I kind of like to watch movies that are generally lighthearted, comedies, I think probably my favorite movie, and it's not about any life philosophy
Sure.
or anything like that, but it's just about enjoying some time, having a break from regular life, is Groundhog Day. I just found that really enjoyable. Bill Murray's an amazing character actor.
Yeah.
He's so funny, but without being amusing as a person.
Sure.
On the screen. In terms of books, I mean, I regret a little bit at the moment that I haven't got enough time, or I don't dedicate enough time to read books. But I always love to read autobiographies, and especially of famous political figures. People like Winston Churchill and John F. Kennedy. It's really intriguing to me how complicated their lives were. You look at John F. Kennedy and the things that were going on in his life, and everyone knows what they are. And yet he still found time to run for president and be president, right? So I think all these people who've been very high achievers, we can learn a great deal from them. The Art of War I really enjoyed as a great book. But I think when I read, I prefer to read about people who've done something in their life, not necessarily made a lot of money, but just done something that they felt was a positive thing for themselves and for the communities in which they're around. So I think for the younger people, if they like to get inspiration, try and read books written by or about successful people who not just have been successful in business, but successful in community and doing something for society as a whole. Because if you keep making money and that's your only goal, I don't see the point, right? So what's the point of being the richest guy in the graveyard? There's no point whatsoever. So my my hope is that I've told my kids that I'll help them with their education, and I'll help them to get a start in the property market. But my aim is to figure out a way that I can die poor because I've given all my money away at that time, right? Of course, you've got to give some to your family, but I think we've got to be careful. You can make life too easy for your children, and that can be a disincentive. So it's always a fine balance between getting them a good start in life and also making sure that they make something of their lives too, because we want our own children and all of the kids that we look after, including the kids at the hub, and really I think for the kids at the hub, the most important thing is to give them confidence that they can do something, other than being kids just used to being in a cycle of poverty. And I think you mentioned it earlier, Patrick, that in your philanthropic endeavours, you like to engage people to better themselves rather than just giving out money, and that's what we try and do as well. Education, I think, is what you said.
Yeah, great, David. So, what about your life ethos?
Yeah, I mean that's that's a really good question, and I was chatting to a friend of mine the other day, and I was talking about ethos, and he said, well, isn't it drinking good wine? I thought, well, that's not a bad answer, right? But I think that it can be summed simply in try and be the best person you can be. Try and do as much as you can for the people around you, whether that's your family or your colleagues or the community. It doesn't cost you anything to smile at someone on the street. It doesn't cost you anything to greet someone who's doing a service job for you. If I'm in a restaurant and I see someone being unkind to a service personnel, to a waiter or a waitress, I always think, well, I wouldn't like to do business with that person, because if they're not big enough to, even if the waitress made a mistake and dropped the food on your lap, okay, she didn't mean to do that, right?
Of course.
It's a mistake, it's an accident. Okay, let it be. So I think if you have an ethos that you be the best person you can and try and be as nice to people as you can, what better way would you want to live your life?
Very true, David. What about the legacy? What kind of legacy do you want to leave?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I asked Reverend Bill Cruz, the one who helped me set up the charity in Thailand. He's one of the most famous 50 Australians because he helps homeless people and children and you name it. And I asked him, Bill, what's your legacy? He said, I don't care about that. I'll be dead, right? And I said, Bill, but don't you want all these things to go on after you? He said, well, I did the best I can when I was alive. So I was thinking about that, and I was quite surprised at his comments. But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, if you really did everything you possibly could when you're alive to help people as much as you can, and he's dedicated his whole life to doing that, then that must be your legacy, right? So, I hope I'm not an egotistical person. I don't think I am. So, I don't want to have a legacy of things with my name on it. But if I can just, another thing that Bill Cruz said is that you can't save the world. You can't change the world. But if you help one child and change the life of one child, you change the world for that child, right? So everything we did in Bangkok, in Hong Kong, and in Myanmar with helping the children, if we could just help one child, it's worth it.
Understand, of course. I would disagree a little bit with Bill. I'm not talking about the legacy part. I believe, in fact, that if you, the reason why we invest a lot into startups and early ventures is because I believe that the people who change the world, right? Obviously we have medical people and so on, but the people that change the world are generally the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Because they have to make a sustainable business model that,
right,
I don't know, does, climate change or whatever the business may be. But if you invest in one entrepreneur, the Elon Musks of this world, because we're not the entrepreneurs, we're actually more financiers. But in terms of the entrepreneurs, if we empower one young entrepreneur, and he or she then becomes a success, it doesn't even have to becomes like Tesla or Facebook. It's more even running a small, medium business. You're creating jobs, community, you're paying tax. So that one person has changed the world. Maybe not to such a profound effect, but so I think, and then the second point is carrying on the legacy for someone like Bill is not because of the ego, actually to build on what he's actually built. And if you scrap that overnight and you have to rebuild it again, I actually think that's a bit of a waste, to be honest. So I think it would be a great shame and waste that if his work is not continued. So I would say it's not a legacy issue, it's more of a continuation and building of whatever is already there.
Right.
So David, what is the next big thing for you?
Well, I think that and by the way, just to defend Bill a little bit, I mean, he does, of course, make sure that he keeps all his good things going. But it was just in the context of a legacy that I thought it was worthwhile sharing those comments. And I think that if just to finish on the legacy, if we can just leave the world a little bit better than when we started, when we first came here, that's a pretty good legacy.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
And as you said, looking after the future generations, which that's why we're doing it for the children, because the children are the future. So the next big thing, as I mentioned, I'm nearly 64. I'd like to, we talk about in the medical business impacting positively 1 billion lives, right? So that doesn't mean we're going to treat 1 billion people. It means that we're going to help people understand that there's a better way of keeping and maintaining your health, rather than just the modern medical system of I mean, doctors are taught to do two things: operate or medicate, right? We think that there's a better way, and empowering people to keep their own health without, for the most part, having to resort to chemical drugs. So we're not dogmatic. There's definitely a place in the world for modern medicine. It's very important, but we want to try and teach people that there's other ways of staying healthy, right? So that's very important to me. I think that's going to make a big impact on society. I'm highly driven to do it. I think that the company itself will probably become a public company in a few years' time, probably here in Hong Kong, which will be, I think, a part of my legacy, you could say, to get it to that stage. And then once the company has got to, the medical company's got to a mature level, then what I'd like to do is to use the rest of my time to do more things in a philanthropic way. Again, to be focused on children. There's so much to do, and again, it gets back to this theme of education you mentioned at the beginning of our talk. I was reading an article by Angelina Jolie, who sponsored a lot of kids in Kenya to go to school, young women, young girls. My wife's doing that in Myanmar as well. Education, education, education. I'd love to do more and more to give kids a better education. And our focus is going to be in Asia because that's where we are. That's where we're growing, where we grew up for the most part. And I think that if you just give these kids the right education, like you said earlier, Patrick, who knows what they could do. So that's basically I've got 3 things left to do. Of course, look after my family, spend time with my family, build this medical business into a global powerhouse, and spend a lot more time helping and educating young children. If I can do those 3 things in the next 30, 40 years of my life, I've told my kids I'm going to live to at least 100, so they've got to have, be prepared for me hanging around until then. And then I'll be really happy.
Sure. David, you missed the 4th element, which is to create a stable in Hong Kong that will be #1 horse races.
Well, Patrick, I'd like to do that, and I hope you'll come along with me on that
Absolutely.
journey.
If you invite me, I'll definitely join. David, on Anything is Possible, our mission is to share positivity. 2 is to overcome challenges, and then 3 is to create one world together, where we try to reduce, inequality in terms of sex, religion, culture, political beliefs. Our last question always is, David Boehm, please share with us your number one advice to our audience, especially to our younger audience.
Yeah, I think that my number one advice to people who are starting their career or still in their education, in fact, is just to, like we talked about earlier, never give up, right? I love the theme, Anything is Possible, because it really is true. And I'd like to wrap it up with a little anecdote, which
Please.
I always like to share about the hub here. And it was a couple of years after we started. Matthew Tsang, who's now the Chief Secretary, was the Secretary for Social Welfare at the time, and he came to visit, and he came to see the kids who were being educated in class, and we're having an English class, and Matthew came in and he said hi to all the kids, and he walked out again, was in a hurry, being a busy executive. But one little boy, who was 9 years old, and it was an English class, and so this was all in English. He said, "Excuse me, sir." And Matthew stopped and he said, "Yes." And he said, "You can't leave." And Matthew said, "Why can't I leave?" He said, "Because, sir, you didn't shake my hand." And Matthew laughed and he went around and he shook all the kids' hand. We took a photo together. And I thought about that a lot. And a word I used earlier is confidence, right? So that little boy from Shwe Ya Min, the poorest district in Hong Kong, 6 months earlier, he had no knowledge of English, probably hardly a couple of words. He had the confidence as a 9-year-old boy from Shwe Ya Min, one of the poorest districts of Hong Kong, to say to one of the senior executives of the government of Hong Kong, "Sir, you didn't shake my hand." And if I can do that for 10 kids or 100 kids or 1,000 kids or 10,000 kids, then that's what I'd like to do. And that's what I think the young kids should bear in mind, is that anything is possible. There's going to, as you mentioned, there's going to be hiccups and bumps in the road along the way. No life is perfect. You mentioned that earlier as well. But if you just make sure to remember that the next day is always going to be better. If it's not the next day, it's 2 days later, your things will improve. And always look to the better future and never look back. And I think that what exemplifies that very well is this half glass full, half glass empty example. And I'm a half glass full guy. If the glass is half full, then I'm really happy. I couldn't possibly imagine to think that it's half empty, right? So I really want to share with the youth of today. I want to say thank you for their enthusiasm and thank you for their dedication to saving the world. They're much better than me when I was at that age, and really, really stay positive. And anything is possible, right, Patrick?
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for joining us. Anything is possible, and look forward to the end of this year, and hopefully 2021 will be a good one for the whole world, not just us.
Let's hope so. I believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.